Here we go. We are live. Have Rico Cortes today. Doug Hamp was supposed to be kind of joining us. Doug and I have been wanting to have Rico on the Prophecy Roundtable to have this discussion about the Red Heifers and whether or not the Levitical sacrificial system is a necessity or a prerequisite for Yeshua to return. But Rico has, he was just telling me he teaches a martial arts class every Thursday night. So I scheduled this for a Wednesday afternoon in between his business. I think he's got a Hebrew class he's teaching later on today. But
Little Hebrews.
Pardon?
The Little Hebrews. I'm doing in Spanish in the morning and I do it in English in the evening.
Okay. And so anyway, Rico, from listening to Rico, talking with him, reading what he has written before, he has devoted a lot of his time and effort into studying the temple system. Actually, I believe he is sort of a disciple or a student with underneath another person. He has a teacher. And so with the Red Heifer craze going on in the Christian prophecy community now, thought we would have Rico on to discuss that, the potential for a rebuilt temple, sacrifices restarting up, and get his position and understanding. So Rico, I guess most people might know you actually that listen to me, but some may not. So
normally we go around the same circles of people.
Yep.
My focus the last 25 years have been studying the temple. Since I started, I've always been gravitated towards the temple. And my teacher is Joseph Good. He's been studying the temple now almost 44 years. And now that we know everything, because we're learning, but I like to think that that's an area that we focus so much in it that we're able to maybe identify certain things that are not necessarily mainstream, only because they're not being really studied. And one of the things that I tell people is, if I tell you, if you're going to study an area in which you have to study 45% of the research to understand that area, is something that 90% of the audience is not interested in. And when it comes to the Bible, 279 commandments of the 613 are directly linked to the temple. But yet, the temple is not a priority of study for people. And I like to think it's because they don't really have a grasp what it means and their significance and the meaning. What is the purpose of God establishing the temple as a teaching tool to allow them to understand the future plans? So my teacher Joe always say that the feasts, the Moedim, and the high holidays like Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, they're a prelude to prophetic picture. And everything within the temple is to teach us about how God is trying to restore humanity back to his sacred space. How he's trying to get humanity to understand the purpose of Yeshua's coming is by eliminating death. That's why everything in the temple dealt with freedom from death. Anything in connection with death cannot have any access to the temple. You cannot fellowship with God in the temple if you had any connection, either being in the room where somebody died, touching somebody who touched the corpse, stepping on the cemetery, touching anything related to death. And many people are not asking that question. Why is that such a strict rituals in regards to corpse impurity and the temple? Why is that relevant to us? I mean, even the red heifer, slaughtering is mysterious because you have water you sprinkled. Now the priest that sprinkled you is unclean, but now you're able to come into the temple and the priest is unclean until evening, and people don't know how to explain that. Yom Kippur is a quandary too, because Yom Kippur is connected in the book of Hebrews in 9:22 by a remission. What type of remission? Let me give you an example. Let me ask you a question. Is there atonement in the Bible, in the book in the Levitical system?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
For forgiveness of sin?
Was there atonement
In the daily sacrificial system or at Yom Kippur for the nation?
Overall. on the daily
Well,
and before.
there was for some unintentional sin.
Thank you. That's it. So you understand quite clearly that the sacrificial system cannot do two things. First, it cannot eradicate death. The Torah
Correct.
cannot do that either. But there was atonement. So what we need to do is redefine terms. If, for example, if a Christian, which many people are now rejecting Yeshua within our circles, and that's because they go study with some of the rabbis, and they're still thinking as Christians in their theology because they don't really study the temple. And a Jew would ask you, well, what do you need to believe in Jesus? I mean, and then you tell them the typical question, answer, because he died for my sins. He forgave my sins. So well, wait a minute. The Torah in Leviticus 4, 5, 6, 7, and Leviticus 16, there's atonement. There was atonement for national sin. There was atonement for individual unwillful, but they're not telling you that, you see, because 90% of Christianity really cannot understand what the purpose of Yeshua's coming was. They're not making a distinction between the purpose of the Torah, pointing out what sin is, with the understanding that the Torah cannot take care, the sacrificial system could not get rid of anything connected with death. It can only cover it, but it can never get rid of it. So therefore, a Jew understands the Torah and a rabbi and say, well, wait a minute, you don't need Jesus. I mean, there's atonement already. And because the message that the Gospels is trying to convey to you is now being reiterated in a proper time for the lack of study on the temple and its functions, many people give up and say, okay, so I don't need Jesus anymore. And they don't understand, and I'm going to prove it to you. In the book of Acts, let me look it up here. If you go to the book of Acts, chapter 13, it's really amazing because the book of Acts 13, if you go towards, I'm in the wrong book. Wait, give me a second. I like to always quote a lot of verses. When we give a lot of opinion, we always get in trouble, and I do my best, try to give as many verses as I can. Let's go to the end of the chapter. Okay. I think verse 36, 37. This says, but David, after serving the purpose of God in his own generation, fell asleep. In other words, he died and was buried with his fathers and experienced decay. So in other words, he did not resurrect. He died. Okay. But he whom God raised up did not experience decay. That's Yeshua. Now, verse 38 is very important. And to be honest with you, we overlook it all the time because we're not understanding the meaning of what Yom Kippur is. And I'm going to explain that to you. It says, therefore, let it be known to you, men and brothers, that through this one, Yeshua's forgiveness of sins. Do you know the word forgiveness? You know what that Greek word is?
Well, I can look it up.
Please do that. The Greek word is aphesis. Now, that word is very unique because that word aphesis, it should be translated as for remission. Remission from what? The word aphesis used to be and still is used in ancient medical terms as a remission of a sickness there's no cure for. So what's interesting is that the writer of the Hebrews, and you find this word, aphesis, 14, 15 times in the New Testament. Like when Yeshua says, drink of my blood, and this is for the remission of sins, right? For your forgiveness of sins. Well, the word there is aphesis. When Yeshua
in Hebrews 9:22, Hebrews 10:18.
Exactly. So the word aphesis is connected to the word jubilee, by the way, when you look it up in the Septuagint. So the message is that God is about to give us a remission. In other words, a forgiveness. That's why it's a gift, because there's no cure for death. But those who believe, those who are righteous and moral, who die believing in the God of Israel, God gives you a gift for your loyalty and becoming the image of God on the earth. And that's remission from the one thing the Levitical system cannot do. The Levitical system cannot give you remission from death. It can give you a renewal of a covenantal relationship every year because God said, I'll forgive you. But you can still keep the Torah perfectly and eventually you will die. But what Yeshua came to do was when he resurrects, God says, hey, the Torah cannot justify you from any of this stuff. Watch. Therefore, let it be known to you, men and brothers, that through this one, remission of sins is proclaimed to you from all the things from which you were not able to be justified by the law of Moses. You can keep the Torah perfectly and still die. Now, in the book of Acts, chapter 3, it reiterates this. I'm sorry, Galatians.
Okay.
Galatians 3, verse 20 and 21. Galatians chapter 3, 20 and 21. It's quite interesting. Now the whole thing makes sense. Okay, it says this. It says, and I no longer live. Oh man, it says, am I in the right chapter? Hold on.
Galatians 3 is 20 and 21, you said?
Yes, sir. Let me read it real quick. It says, now the mediator is not for one, but God is one. Now, verse 21 is key. It says, therefore, is the law opposed to the promises of God? But then you have to ask the question, what are the promises of God? What is the hope? Resurrection. That's what the book of Hebrews is telling you. It says, may it never be, for if the law has been given, for if a law has been given that was able to give life, certainly righteousness will have been from the law. Now it makes sense why in Romans chapter 3, verse 21, you find this formula that everyone uses to do away with the Torah, not understanding the purpose of Yeshua. It says, for now, apart from the Torah, because the Torah did not have the power to give you eternal life. That is only at the discretion of the king. It says, for now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been revealed, being testified about by the law and the prophets. That is, the righteousness of God through faith in Yeshua to all who believe, for there's no distinction. Now watch. If you understand temple, this will make sense. It says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, being justified as a gift by his grace through the redemption, which is in Messiah Yeshua, whom God made publicly available as a mercy seat. In your Bible says propitiation. That is a Yom Kippur language. But you never hear from the pulpit as in the context of Yom Kippur. What it's telling you is that the Yom Kippur every year was not equipped for you to live forever. It was a renewal of a covenant yearly, and it was not equipped to take away death. Only the king can get doing that away, but it had to be ratified with blood. So therefore, red heifer comes into play, because now the red heifer is actually the ashes served as it's a commandment, by the way. People don't realize that if they're going to build a temple, they need the red heifer ashes, because it's a command throughout your generations to do away with the work of Yeshua. No, absolutely not, because we already know that the temple functions had nothing to do with the work of Yeshua, because Yeshua's work of redemption came through resurrection, so that God could publicly put against on the cross the decree that was against humanity, which was death. That's the curse of the law, is death. Mm-hmm. Okay. So therefore now the temple is a microcosm teaching you that in order, give me 1 second. The temple is teaching you that no one can come into God's domain, because we all have had connection with death. We are living in mortal bodies. So the temple is a microcosm of, if you want to enter to sacred space, you have to make sure that you have no connection with death, because the whole world surrounding Israel, their worship was connected with the underworld gods. Here it's about life. It's not about death. So in order to restore your body by the standards of God's holiness, if you had any connection with death, you need to be sprinkled with the ashes. It's a mysterious type of corpse, antibacterial type thing. It was more for the conscience.
Don't the rabbis call it choke? In other words, we don't understand it. We're just commanded to do it.
Exactly. And the reason why it's so confusing to people is because they don't understand when you look into ancient Near Eastern rituals, ancient Near Eastern religions, and even the Greco-Roman religion, you realize that everything is based on the underworld and death. So what happens is, here is the opposite. It's all about life. That's why nothing in the temple can look like the nations worship other gods, which was based on the world gods.
Let me ask you some questions that I know people will have. So Yeshua came obviously the first time as the Lamb, as the kinsman redeemer, as et cetera, et cetera. So for what purpose or reason do you in other words, if you were going to say, okay, This is why, prior to Yeshua returning, the red heifers must be killed, and the Levitical temple system, sacrificial system, reinstituted as a prerequisite for him to return.
Okay, are we waiting for Messiah to come in a Jubilee year?
I believe he will probably come on a Yom Teruah prior to 10 days prior there too. So,
yeah, but the language in Matthew 24, verse 30 and 31 is a Yom Kippur language.
Well, I agree.
Because, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot is one long celebration. They have different themes within the one thing. It's like Passover, unleavened bread, and Sukkot. And Pentecost. It's all one long celebration. People, you cannot look individually. So Yom Teruah is the enthronement. Yom HaKiseh, the enthronement of God. Then Yom Kippur is God's judgment as judge and king. And on Tabernacles is the victory over death. By the way, did you know that there's a prayer when people go to Sukkot and they neither wave the lulav or build the sukkah? And that's the two commandments about Sukkot, by the way. So when you build the sukkah, and after you finish the last day building the sukkah and you're tearing it down, there's a prayer. The prayer goes like this: May it be your will, O Lord our God, that next year in Jerusalem we will build our sukkah with the skins of Leviathan. Now, what's interesting is that the whole book of Revelation is about the victory of Yeshua over the beast, over the serpent, over Leviathan, over Rahab. So therefore, Tabernacle now takes a different tone, in which is the feast of the Lamb over the victory over death, because Leviathan, Rahab, and the beast, and all that represents death. So therefore, the whole theme is about coming back to God's presence. So if Yeshua's coming on a Jubilee year, which I believe he will, well, wait a minute. There are strict commandments about who declares and from where they declare the Jubilee. It cannot be randomly done. I've heard people doing that all the time, and I heard people in your panels talk about it and going like, they have no idea about the temple. And I'm going like, sometimes people are throwing things around as if the Bible can be basically, they determine legal things away from the legal areas. And you're a lawyer, so you know what I mean. The Jubilee year has been regulated and is connected. One of the beautiful things God did, and you see this in Numbers 28 and 29, that every major holiday is connected with the temple proper. The new moon celebration, according to Numbers 28, verse 11, includes sacrifices. So therefore, you can see the new moon. You know it's the new moon. You know it's a new month. You can even say it's a new month, but you cannot declare it as a holiday for the feast, because God restricted that to the holy things according to Ezekiel 44, 23 and 24, and also Leviticus 23, and also in the book of Leviticus 25 and Jubilee, he declared those things connected with the altar. In other words, the new moon is connected with sacrifices. So you need to see it. Then once you see it, you have to declare it from the place where God has chose to place his name. Declare it official from there. And then because it's connected with the sacrifices, that means that the Sanhedrin Council, which had the legal judicial authority, according to the Torah, this is not Judaism, according to the Torah, they are the ones who now legally declares it. Thus, they carry the responsibility if they messed up. Numbers 18. They carry the iniquity of the priesthood and the iniquity of their tabernacle in the temple. Therefore, the Jubilee can only be declared on a Jubilee cycle. It can be only done after the service of Yom Kippur. Leviticus chapter 25 and 27 talks about this. So therefore, there are legal ramifications of when you declare this specific days, because the great shofar cannot be blown in the temple times, not now, but in the temple times, the shofar cannot be blown on the Day of Atonement in any other time except for the year you declare the Jubilee. It's a specific time. Any other time, you never blow it in the 49-year cycle. You never blow the shofar in the temple on the Day of Atonement, only when you declare Yom Kippur.
I have a question for you.
Jubilee, I'm sorry.
No, I just have a question as far as your understanding and study on the Jubilee cycle. Do you believe it's every 50 years, or that 50th year is also the first year of the next? It's only 49.
I believe it's every 50 years.
Every 50. So
Yeah.
year 51 starts a new cycle. It's not.
I believe that, but to me, I don't know.
I, I
Yeah, I believe it's 50.
Well, I do too. And you listen. We talked briefly before we went live, and you had listened into to a recent discussion when I had Joe Dumond on, and he is like dogmatic. It's a 49 year, and I like Joe. I think he's dogmatic in his system. He believes he understands the cycles, and that he's and that he based on his system he can set certain dates. And again, I like him, but so far the few dates that he has said things would happen, things have not happened. So
so I got a question.
Batting over right now.
Right. So I got a question. Well, you got to follow the biblical blueprint. How many days to Pentecost? 49 or 50?
Well, it's 49, and then the next day is 50.
There you go. And you celebrate it on the 50th day, correct?
Exactly.
So you got to follow what's already established. And we have to stop reinventing the wheel, because that's what confusion happens. By the way, the Jubilee year can only be declared out of the temple. You have to have an altar, because it includes sacrifices.
That's really so in other words, the red heifer sacrificial, and I do believe that Yeshua was a type of red heifer killed outside the camp, outside the walls. That is one reason why you believe and teach, and I'm not saying I don't. I probably very likely agree with you. In other words, I just want you to explain it more, because I can't explain it well enough, because I haven't spent the time studying it, as to, for instance, why these red heifers will need to be sacrificed for Yeshua's return. And you're saying that essentially the Levitical system has to be reinstituted to proclaim that Jubilee year for the King to come. Am I making it too simple, or?
No, I think that you're on the right line there. I mean, let me try to break it down. Okay, so first of all, it's not a sacrifice. I had to correct that myself. It was slaughtering, because it's not really on an altar. It's a pit that they do on the
red heifer.
Yes, red heifer. But the question is also, what is the purpose of the paraduma, the red heifer? What is the function of it? The function of it is to have the ashes, because God in Numbers, the book of Numbers 19, specifically tells us that it has a purpose and a function, which is to cleanse you from corpse impurity. Because the place where you live, where the temple is holy ground, so that it cannot have any connection with this. Right now, that place is corpse. It has corpse impurity. All of us, we all have corpse impurity. In other words, we're all ritually unclean with corpse impurity, but we should be morally pure, because that's what really God is looking for, no matter where you're at. But in regards to the prophetic picture, you have certain requirements. Okay, let me try to find it here for you. For example, I wrote them down. It says the red heifer has to have specific age. Right now we had 5, 2 got disqualified. We have 3 that are qualified. Yes.
Where is that in the Torah as far as the age?
Is when it talks about heifer and a calf.
Okay.
So what it is, they obviously you have the ages of the different stages of the calf. So then they figure it out based on the stages when they go transition from one stage to the next one. For example, a lamb of the first year. You know that a 8-day-old lamb is a lamb of the first year.
Inclusive.
It's an 8-day-old. So and once it's born on the 8th day, past that, it's already 1 year. That's according to that's a lamb of the first year. That's why you need more than one in Passover. It's not very big. I've seen one of 14 days, and you cannot fill the whole 10 people with that. It's very small. So you see the transitions from, and I forgot the name, Ugla or Igla. I can't remember. I'm so sorry for the pronunciation. You go from one transition to the no one in the development stages of the animal, and that's how they can tell when they make that transition, that age group.
So a heifer then would be a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old?
Exactly, between 2 and 3 years old. Exactly,
between 2 and 3. Okay.
Yeah. So then you have the ashes of that heifer, and by when it says hyssop. Hyssop was used for corpse impurity. They used it for Passover in Egypt. They used hyssop. scarlet yarn, and they use the water. And every time you see the word hyssop in the Bible, it's normally connected with corpse impurity. It's kind of interesting because of an antibacterial type thing. Okay, so you have that also in the red heifer, and you have it even when David prayed, "Wash me," with hyssop. But wait a minute, what do you mean? No person was ever washed with hyssop in the Bible. He is conveying the messages, I am dead man walking. I need to be justified. I need to be forgiven because what he did was willful rebellion. Anyway, so the heifer now goes through the process. You have the heifers, which is a sign that we are in the last days. Now we don't have just one, we have 5. Two got eliminated, we got 3. Now, based on the source that I have are the people taking care of them. Mo from Bonei Israel. He is one of the main guys, other than Hanan, and the 2 leading rabbis that are working with them too. They work with us and Joe and I to be informed. For what they told us is they plan to slaughter it by Passover or before Passover. According to the tractate in the Mishnah, they always slaughter the red heifer a month before Passover. Now, it makes sense why. It makes sense why, Scott, because if you're going to go to Jerusalem, if you have corpse impurity, you need the ashes in order for them to go into the high holidays in the spring. So now imagine if they're able to do that, slaughtering, they have the place. They already have the piece of land. They bought it.
That was one of my questions. Is this location, this place on or around the Mount of Olives?
Absolutely. It's right next to the, it's I know exactly where it is. It's empty. And by the way, Bonei Israel owns it. They own that piece of land.
Bonei Israel?
That's the organization that brought the red heifers to Israel.
Okay.
So they're the ones who brought them over. And my Spanish tour was the first tour to actually see the red heifers when they brought them over there. Now they're moving them to Shiloh.
Yeah, I saw them in Shiloh about 5 weeks ago.
Right. I'm supposed to be going to Israel. I was supposed to be in Israel today, but we couldn't go. Then what happens is the ashes is for corpse impurity. Now think about this logically. Can the word of God change? Does God change?
No.
Okay, so if God in the book of Numbers tells you that this is a statute forever, right? And we're going to be on the earth when Messiah returns. And then when we are on the earth, then the Bible says we have to go up to Jerusalem to Pentecost. To tabernacles. And you come from the nations and you have corpse impurity, because I believe people will still be dying in the millennial reign. There will be those who will be transformed, and there are those who will be born through the millennium. They're going to be dying. So there will still be corpse impurity, but all the nations got to go up to Jerusalem, because Yeshua will be ruling and reigning, and God is always going to be ruling and reigning, right? And Yeshua is going to rule on his behalf on the earth. And then we have to present offerings and donations, and also what is called tribute, which is a tithe, a tribute. Well, guess what? If there's going to be death on the earth at that moment for the people who are not part of the kingdom, then there's going to be corpse impurity. And God does not change. So therefore, people have a struggle with this stuff. They're not really understanding the function of Yeshua's death and resurrection. This has nothing to do with Yeshua's death and resurrection, because the purpose of Yeshua's death and resurrection, I already read you 2 verses that says the Torah cannot do for you. The temple cannot do that. It just cleanses you to enter sacred space, to fellowship with God. It's the hub. It's like if you go to see the president, right? And you go to the White House. I mean, when you go to see the White House and meeting with the president or anyone royal, you're going to change. You're going to get a haircut. You're going to buy a new suit. You're going to present yourself in order to meet somebody that has status. How much more God's kingdom? He's going to be ruling and reigning out of Jerusalem. So there you're presenting yourself before the king. And he says, I want nothing connected with death when you come see me. Well, wait a minute. Well, Jesus died and resurrected, so I could do whatever I want. Excuse me. What he did was doing you a favor, so you can forever dwell within his presence, because death cannot dwell within the presence of God. That's why death has been defeated. 1 Corinthians 15, Revelation 21:4, Isaiah 25:8. That's the whole premise. So therefore, in the temple, to everything kicked prophetically, you need to restore sacred space. because the enemy is going to profane God's hub of authority, which is Jerusalem, which is the Temple Mount. That's the place where he has placed his name. Thus, that's the target of the enemy to profane. Yes.
And I would say there's an ongoing defamation currently, assuming. And do you believe that the current what we call the Temple Mount, or the Dome of the Rock, is the location as far as the Temple Mount? I know there's a huge debate amongst many people, but I believe there's an ongoing defamation with the Dome of the Rock, not the abomination of desolation, but an ongoing.
Yeah.
An ongoing affront to Yod He Vav He.
Well, to me, there's not one shred of evidence, and I would like to see people trying to point it out. I've spoken with Dan Bahat, Eilat Mazar, Eli Shukron. I've spoken with Ori Peleg. I have read some of the leading authorities in archaeology, and I talked to the lady Eilat Mazar, who passed away now 1.5 to 2 years, who she found the city of David. She's the one who found with the entry of the city of David, where they had the palace. That's the one who found it. Eli Shukron gave us a private tour. He's the one who found above the Gihon Spring what he calls a Melchizedek altar. Okay, and I asked him personally. All these people are leading authorities of archaeology in the last 60 years, and I've asked him, have you found any evidence at all of the temple being on the city of David? And these guys have been there for 40, 50 years. They say, no, not once. By the way, the Bible supports this in Ezekiel 43. Ezekiel 43, verse 10 says this: you, son of man, describe the house. I'm sorry, verse 12. It says, this is the law of the temple on the top of the mountain, all around its territory, all the way around. It will be most holy. Look, this is the law of the temple. Now, on the top of the mount, if you do a 2-minute archaeological and topographical map of Jerusalem, you've been to the city of David, and you got to walk up almost 1/4 mile, and it's always going down.
It's there.
And right there, by the way, most holy in Hebrew is Kadosh HaKadoshim, holiness of holiness. The top of the mountain is considered holiness of holiness. If the city of David was the location of the temple, then the Al-Aqsa would have been down in the city of David, because in the ancient Near East, when they conquer new places, they always build sacred spaces on the same location.
Yeah, they would take a holy space, and Islam would, I'm not being mean, but they'd be like a dog, and they would mark their territory.
That's exactly it. So therefore, anyone who, and I can say this in full confidence, please, I'm not saying in arrogance, that's not my intent. But to be honest with you, I'm going to say it. If you're listening to people who tell you the city of David, you don't know what you're talking about. There's not one piece of evidence, archaeologically, topographically, biblically, that supports the city of David. Now, it does mention that there was, before the temple, people lived there. And it's only logical that somebody would have a place to worship that was not connected with the worship of God.
Well, the crazier theories, Rico, and I'm sure you've heard some of this. I'm just going to call it nonsense and not be nice. But those that are now trying to say that the Promised Land and the temple were in America or Africa, it's like, do you get bored? I really want to ask these people, are you just bored and you just want to think of new stuff? I mean, have you went so far down the rabbit hole of the conspiracy theories that you're now trying to argue that it was Egypt or Tanzania or Utah?
Yeah. Well, we got to remember that there's no structure, and we are in the time of the judges where everyone does according to their own imagination of their hearts. Now, let me ask you this. Did you know the original name of Africa, what it was?
I do not.
Eden.
Ah.
Now think logically. If you're reading the Bible and you read in the creation story where it says that the garden was east of Eden, now it makes sense, because the lands were divided after the flood. So now it will make sense. And it's interesting that all of the north of Africa is all pure sand. It's completely like cursed. There's huge aquifer on the Libya, by the way. That's what really provoked me to start looking into this. There's one of the biggest aquifer of water underneath that whole sand. And they tried to tap into it when they got into the Civil War. Then I went back and I did my research on Africa, and I'm thinking, could it be? And I'm thinking, no. My theory was, what if Africa was Eden and the garden was east of Eden? Because the garden in Eden, now the Garden of Eden.
Well,
that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's and Halisa.
And by the way, I'm not saying I'm right. That's only based on what I found.
Halisa bogged my brain one day listening to her teaching on the four rivers that came out for, it was, I'll put it this way, I would have to put on my thinking cap and really go back and listen to that, and because I was lost. I mean, I was.
Halisa is deep, man. She's no joke.
She's no. Again, I try to I didn't have on my thinking cap that day.
No, so. Halisa's a thinker, man. She's a treasure. She should be valued. She knows a lot of stuff.
And I was in Israel with her, by the way, her tour group.
Yeah.
So
yeah, she's good. So let me follow the steps of the red heifer. So you have a red heifer, we have it. Next, you're gonna have coarse impurity, the ashes for the red heifer, coarse impurity, because Yom Kippur is basically anything connected with death you don't want. You don't have it. You don't want that. So if you want to come into the temple, you have to be free of any connection with the death, because the temple is about life. It's not about death. Okay. It's like, for example, when you see the word sacrifice versus korban, offerings, right? The word korban, which everyone translates as sacrifices, I ask this, by the way, I've asked this all the time. When I say, what do you think immediately when you say sacrifice? Everyone says death. But when you think about the word korban in Hebrew, the word is to draw near. And that's consistent with the Bible narrative. So when you think about an offering in the temple, people think about death, when in fact, it's about the life and the blood, and the food source of the priests and the Levites and their families was the offerings. The offerings allow you to come near God, to be restored if you needed to, or fellowship if you had to. And then the animals was not about death. It's about the life of providing the source of food for the people working on behalf of the people. So then you cleanse the Temple Mount of coarse impurity. People don't know that on the west side of the wall, which is the western wall is there, but there are people buried in that wall by the Jordanian kingdom. They buried people in that wall. There's actually corpses there. That needs to be cleansed. All of that needs to be cleansed. Then you have measuring of the area of the altar. We need to know where the altar was. So if there's going to be an altar, why? Something that what's his name? Joe mentioned. And I tried to mention this to him, but unfortunately, it's never successful. Is that he uses a lot Daniel 12, verse 11. And I wish he didn't.
Okay. You're talking
and by the way, this is something I mentioned to him before. It's not like I want to talk ill about everybody. I'm not doing that. But if you want to talk about the last days, make sure you know your stuff according to the temple. And don't quote Daniel 12, 11. It says, from the time of the regular burnt offering is removed from the abomination that causes desolation. Guys, that's not a symbolic thing. That is called the Tamid. Regular Tamid. Have anybody even bothered looking into what the Tamid offering was? It's a continual. Did you know that was ordained on Mount Sinai? Let me read it to you. In the book of Numbers, chapter 28. It says, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, command the children of Israel, command the Israelites, and say to them, you will be careful to present my offerings, my food, and my offerings made by fire. So this is not even the Jews' offering. This is God's offering, because these are the tributes. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so you're referring to where Joe spiritualized that and took it back to 2020 when the COVID scamdemic started and they couldn't gather. Right. And
sorry, that's
if you couldn't tell, I pushed back pretty hard on
that's just on pulling on straws. That's no way. And it says, let me continue. It says, of a frequency of appeasement to me, it is at its appointed time. That is at 9 in the morning and at 3 in the afternoon. And then on the ones for Sabbath and the offerings for the new moon and for the feast, they did it at noon. Musaf, the additional ones. And it says, at the appointed time, you will say to them, this is the offering the offering made by fire that you will offer to the Lord, 2 male lambs without defect in the first year, as a continual burnt offering each day. You will offer 1 lamb in the morning and 1 second lamb you will offer at twilight, and a tenth of an ephah. Fine, you'll get that right. Now, verse 6. Can you read verse 6, please?
In Daniel?
No. In Numbers.
Which,
It says, I'll read it. Numbers 28, verse 6. It is a continual burnt offering that was ordained on Mount Sinai. This was ordained on Mount Sinai. So how can you tell me this has anything to do with COVID? This is a literal offering that has to be done on the altar. And if the anti-Messiah is going to profane the authority of God on the earth, that doesn't happen in any other place where the place his name, where his house and his temple was. And the altar represents the authority of God on the earth. And the moment he sits in the temple, and by the way, no one can sit in the temple except one person. Did you know that?
When you say no one can sit in the temple,
no one can sit in this area except one person.
I know the high priest could only go back into the Holy of Holies one time once a year. I don't. What
he can never sit. No one can sit.
Okay, no one can sit.
No one except one person.
Who's that?
A king of the line of David.
Okay.
But he cannot go here. This is the holy place, the temple. He can sit in the court of Israel in a location north of the altar because he is the Prince of God on the earth.
Where is that from?
What do you mean, where's that from?
Well, you said from where?
Thessalonians. When Thessalonians says the son of perdition will enter the temple and he will sit as if he is God.
Right. But I'm saying where is there a prohibition about sitting in the temple location?
Man, now you got me. I got to go look that up. But it's actually, yeah, it's a good question. It's actually, Mishnah talks about this because, for example, there's a protocol. You never turn your back to the temple because you're turning your back to God. And you cannot sit because you are standing in the presence of a king. Okay, now if you sat, you have to go to the adjacent buildings over here where they can sit and eat their stuff and away from the area where they can see them. Where the altar is, no one can sit. No one can do it except one person. The king of the land of David, he can sit in the court of Israel. Now, Herod, to prove the point, Herod was a king of Israel, but he was not of the land of David. He never could sit there. That's why the royal stoa was built. He can sit someplace else. He can bring a donation. He was Jewish by conversion, but he cannot sit there because he knew he was not of the line of David. They will never allow him. And people need to know this because then when you sit in that location, not inside the temple, because we already have a precedent of a king who tried to do the incense service. I think it's King Uzziah. I can't remember. Okay, one of those. And 70-something priests came out and kicked him out, and he got leprosy for 14 years because he tried to do the incense. So no king can do any of the service. I can't hear you.
He was trying to mix the king and the priest role.
Who was?
The king you just mentioned that did
right.
that violated Torah by doing that because he was not a Levitical priest. He was not an Aaronic priest.
Exactly. And that's why the book of Hebrews is desperately trying to let you know that Yeshua comes in the order of, in the similitude of, in the heavenly tabernacle, because even the book of Hebrews in chapter 7 and chapter 8 clearly tells you that Yeshua could not be a priest on the earth because he's not of the sons of Aaron. So what makes us think that when he returns, he's going to be a priest? He can be on the earth. Only the sons of Aaron were ordained, anointed, and dedicated. According to the Bible.
In the Levitical and in the Aaronic system, he is not. I mean, Hebrews makes that very clear that Yeshua is not a priest of the Aaronic priesthood. I mean,
but by the way, this is the reason why Yeshua could only officiate in the tabernacle in the heavens, in the area which the Levites have no jurisdiction, because they are only ordained to do it here on the earth when there's a temple. It's about legal jurisdiction.
Right, I understand. We're in agreement. I know that any of my a lot of my Christian friends who think I'm a little crazy actually do listen in sometimes because they tell me and they'll ask me questions. But your average Christian is going to go, think that you're off your rocker, Rico. That I mean, you know that, but
Yeah, I know.
but in the first discussion, I think maybe one of the first times I had you on, we were talking about look what the disciples did. They were still going to the temple. They were still participating in they weren't Aaronic or Levitical priests, but they were still participating. Paul was still doing, to kind of prove that he wasn't teaching against the Torah and against the temple practice. So he did what was it that the Nazirite vow?
Right.
He paid for some people.
So let me propose this to you and the audience that may be listening who may have a problem with this. They want the coming of Messiah, but they don't want to understand that everything prophetically is connected with the temple and the offerings. But let me ask you this. Do you think that Yeshua in 40 days after the resurrection could have made a valid point about establishing and leaving us with enough information about what should we be done after the resurrection?
Well, I'm sure he explained quite a bit to the disciples.
But it's not written anywhere.
Not recorded. It's as you said.
I mean, you would think that'd be important. So what I always tell the audience is this. How come after the resurrection, there's not one shred of evidence in the New Testament that says that Yeshua, neither Peter, neither John, neither Paul, or James, none of them objected or spoke against the temple, Sanhedrin, the offerings, the tithing, and the donations, all the feasts. There's not one piece in 40 days. This president created more havoc. His first 40 days in office. His first 40 days of this president created more chaos in 40 days and 100 days. And Yeshua's resurrection in 40 days. There's that. I mean, that would have been, think about it. That would have been the perfect time for him to say, hey, guys, let's go storm the temple and let them know that they're no longer here to do the work. He could have gone into the Holy of Holies, and he didn't.
Or for it, not that I have many Catholic, but a lot of people might be Reformed theology, which brought a lot of Catholic eschatology over with them. When Peter asked, when he asked Yeshua, he says, "Is it now that you're going to restore the kingdom to Israel?" I mean, our dispensational brothers at least understand that Israel is going, is a nation, will be a nation. They just don't understand that they too are Israel. They think only the Jews are Israel.
Yeah,
but we know that the gathering is going to happen. I look at like you. I look at Ezekiel 40 through 48, and I take it literally. I mean, I do not try to say that was fulfilled or it wasn't fulfilled because Judah didn't do their job correctly. If it's not literal, then I don't understand why it was written and recorded in Scripture.
You mentioned it really good. You just said the gathering, and it provoked me to look at something. So check this out. When you look in the book of Revelation, I think it's chapter 14. Let me tell you how the coming of Messiah is already telling us what time of the year using agricultural language. Watch. It says, and this is chapter 14, verse 14. When you triggered it by saying the gathering, it proves the point. It says, and I look and behold a white cloud, and on the cloud was seated one like the Son of Man. That's a direct quote to Daniel 7:13. All right. And in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying out with a loud voice to the one sitting on the cloud. The one sitting on the cloud is Yeshua, who is now the Son of Man, he's already been enthroned to come and rule and reign and wage war against Amalek and the enemy. Watch. Send out your sickle and reap, because the hour to reap has come, because the harvest of the earth is ripe. Now we need to ask, which harvest? All the feasts are based on different type of harvest. And it says, and the one seated on the cloud swung his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple. Again, we talk about book of Revelation, never study the temple, and is using temple language. And it says, he also had a sharp sickle. And another angel had the authority over the fire, went out from the altar. So now he's using temple service, and he called out with a loud voice to the one who had the sharp sickle, saying, send thou your sharp sickle the harvest of the clusters of grapes from the vine on the earth, because his grapes are at a prime, and the angel harvests the vine of the earth, and through the grapes into the great winepress, wrath of God. What time of the year is that?
That's the fall. That's the grapes of wrath.
Thank you. Okay, so now you mean to tell me the book of Revelation is telling me about the second coming of Messiah during the time of Yom Teruah to Sukkot? Because that's the time you start gathering the harvest. Because when I get to Israel in November, they already picked the grapes up.
Yeah, I've got and I like him. I'll say his name. His name is Craig Bong. He thinks we're getting raptured next month, by the way. And he's one of these that
I don't know him.
No, he's a nice guy. He really is. But he read something from Josephus, which talked about cold and the winter. And he for some reason has now moved the 7th month back to December time. So it's
follow Torah at all.
He's starting to understand the feast, but no, as far as the Torah, he would be what we would call a dispensational pre-trib rapture adamant. He's dogmatic on it. He's getting raptured next month. I've told him, dude, when we're talking in January, King Charles is not the Antichrist next month, and you're still here. I'm not going to say I told you so, but let's talk. Because he needs to learn this over the next few years, I believe.
Well, I'll make a recommendation. If there's no rapture and the rapture is not happening next month, he should not ever say anything about prophecy again. Yeah, he will be considered false prophet. That's the problem that we're having, is that we don't keep these guys accountable. We keep giving them a platform to speak and spill out all the crazy stuff they're saying. And then when nothing happens, we keep giving them a platform. You know why? Because people like controversy. They don't want truth. They want controversy. Give me some speculation and give me some prophecy. Even if it never comes true, we still have the same people come back and keep running circles like a rat, telling people, oh, the things that are going to happen that never happen. People get excited. You know who's going to suffer on this? The honor of our Messiah will be suffering, because we make it a laughing stock by moving away from the blueprint that he already established. And we are blamed by giving them this platform.
Well, and you will never hear me set a date, Rico. I do believe Yeshua returns. I do believe Yeshua returns after 2 days, with the day being 1,000 years. But I don't know what year he ascended. I don't know what year he returned to his place. I'm not certain on it. And if me and you are still chatting in 2035 and Yeshua should not return, I was just incorrect and wrong. And I ever, until I see what you mentioned earlier, until I see this beast, this man of lawlessness, sit in the temple and declare to be God, and I witnessed with my own eyes the abomination of desolation, and I can't buy and sell, and me and you aren't going to even be able to talk like this on the internet anymore. I'm pretty sure they're going to shut this down. At that point in time, Rico,
it'll be too late.
Well, too late for others. But what I'm saying, at that point in time, then I think we can say, okay, Yeshua is returning in such and such time, such and such year.
I agree. And again, you just led me right into the point that I wanted to bring. There's a reason why the red heifer is important. Because if they manage to slaughter the red heifer, that is a huge thing. They're going to have the ashes. Now they have the ashes. They already have the priest, and they have the high priest, by the way. And they already have some of the elements. Now, they cannot build a temple tomorrow, guys. And there's another theory going around that they can build a tent. No, it can't. The blueprint cannot change. The tabernacle, it's people reinventing the wheel. Cannot happen. It has to be so.
Let me ask you this, though, real quick. Did not, when Judah returned, when they were allowed to return, and before they built the temple, did they not already start the sacrifices when we read Ezra and Nehemiah?
Yes.
Okay. Why was the temple for the sacrifices to start?
Altered.
Why? Because they did. Let me preface it. Because obviously, for the 40 years in the wilderness, and up until Solomon built the temple, there were the daily, there was the Tamid. It continued. It was in the tabernacle. Obviously, we had the Ark of the Covenant at the time. What's his Obed the Edomite, Obed Edom? It was on his place for a while. I'm assuming they were doing sacrifices there.
Well, not in the city of David. He was in the city of David. The Ark was in the city of David but the offerings were taking place in Givon, which is 2 miles north of Jerusalem. That's why they had 2 high priests. They had Zadok in the city of David, and they had Abiathar with the tabernacle, because you're not to let the Ark of the Covenant be by itself. So in the city of David, they had the Ark of the Covenant, but they were not authorized to do the offerings. That took place in the tabernacle north of Jerusalem.
Okay. And then for a while, the tabernacle was in Shiloh for hundreds of years, if I'm correct.
Yeah, almost 4 centuries.
And so again, why could they not build an altar and start the sacrifices without even having a tabernacle or without having the temple?
Well, they can. I'm of the opinion that they that's the first thing they need to build. And the altar. Yeah, I believe that. I mean, let's take a biblical precedent, and you understand this legal language. When Noah came out of the ark, the first thing he did was what? He built an altar, and he planted a vineyard. When Abraham came into the land, he built an altar. Okay. When Israel went into the wilderness, they built an altar. They came into the land, they built an altar.
They built an altar.
And when they come back from Babylon, they build an altar. I mean, again, it's temple language that we never consider. So why is the prophecy so much focused on the daily? Because the altar represents the authority of God. We already saw in the book of Revelation that is using the altar and the temple. Chapter 8 of the book of Revelation is using the altar and the altar of incense, and the censer is Yom Kippur. This is all Yom Kippur, and therefore is telling us about the end times. So when the false Messiah comes into the temple, by him sitting there, if he is not a son of David, he now profanes God's sacred space. Let me show you what I mean. When you go to, I have a document here. If you give me 1 second, I want to find it, because I think it's important for you to see this. I call it a function, purpose, and the role of Messiah's ministry. Now, what is interesting is God has a hierarchy. We know that Yeshua is called the Prince of the Presence. Acts chapter 5, verse 30 and 31 calls him Prince and Savior. And then in Revelation 1:5 say he calls him the ruler of the kings of the earth. Now, when you go back and you start looking into the enthronement of King Saul, the enthronement of David, the enthronement of Solomon, you find something quite interesting. Listen to this. 1 Chronicles 29, verse 22 to 23. And they ate and drank before the Lord that day with great joy. And they gave the investiture of the kingdom for a second time to Solomon, the son of David. And before the Lord, they anointed him, Solomon, prince, and Zadok the priest. It's telling you in First Chronicles that they anointed Solomon as prince. But wait a minute, isn't he the king? He is the hierarchy of the kingdom is the king of Israel is the image of God on the earth, and he is the prince of God, but he is given the authority and power to rule God's kingdom. And I know, and Solomon sat on the throne of the Lord. See, in verse 23, and Solomon sat king on the throne of the Lord in the place of David, his father. So the throne of the Lord, God has given to David, and then to Solomon, and then eventually to Yeshua.
That's so that would probably be the verse. And Joel Blackford pointed out, he said earlier that what you were saying about no one could sit in the temple was just from the Mishnah. That would be an example of where Solomon was sitting in the temple area, that throne, as his representative on earth.
More or less, it can be either his palace or maybe in that location, because he becomes Prince of God. And now 1 Samuel 25:30 says, and it will come to pass when the Lord will do for my Lord according to all the good that he has spoken of you, and he will make you prince over Israel. That's when God made David his prince and king to Israel. 2 Samuel 5, verse 2 and 3 says, even before, when Saul was still king over Israel, you were the one who guided Israel in their coming and going. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd, to David, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will be prince over Israel. So all the elders of Israel came to the king of Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them in Hebron before the Lord. And they anointed David as king over Israel, but God made him his prince. That's why I believe Yeshua is a prince of the presence. Okay, Samuel, 1 Samuel 10:1. It says, then Samuel took the oil and he poured on the head of Saul and kissed and said, the Lord has anointed you as prince over his inheritance. This is something we don't think about. So when the false Messiah comes in and he sits, he's basically saying, wait a minute, I am the king of Israel and I was ordained by God as his prince. What if God did not ordain him? That's why Philippians is quite clear. After the resurrection, God gives him authority, power, and honor. In the book of Revelation, chapter 5, the Messiah, the Lamb, who is standing next to the one sitting on the throne, he grabs the document, and then all the ancient elders throw their crowns on him, and he's bestowed upon him honor and glory and power. Now he's coming to rule and reign on behalf of the Father as the Prince of God and the King of Israel.
Let me ask you this real quick, because you brought it up earlier. We talked about the Tamid, in other words, the daily being taken away by this future anti-Messiah, this beast, whatever title, the man of sin, the man of lawlessness. What do you believe that that the abomination that lays waste being set up will be? Like a sort of, do you think it'll be something similar to what Antiochus did as a sort of an anti-type or a type of anti-Messiah, an image, sort of like Nebuchadnezzar set up an image and require one to worship the image? Do you have a educated opinion on that?
I do have an educated one. It's simply my opinion.
Okay.
I don't hold any theological based on that. It's basically my opinion. Is that there's been cyclical events in the story of Israel that is always something like, for the image on the golden calf. It was an image. It was a bull or a golden calf, a calf. Okay. Then later on, we have the kings of Israel. They place different images next to the altar. Then you have, there's always a cyclical pattern about the authority of God being usurped by any strange worship, which is called in Hebrew avodah zarah, right? It's cyclical.
I call it syncretism, or mixing truth.
Yeah, syncretism
with error.
Correct. So if you look at the story of Hitler, you can quite say that a lot of things he did, when you read the book of Revelation, you're going like, oh snap, this guy won a 1,000-year reign. He put a mark on the arm of the Jews. They could not do anything. I mean, so you look at it and you're going like, So it's a cyclical thing. What if I say to you, AI may have a lot to do with this?
I would agree.
I would have never said that until the last 3 years. AI is basically, the world is, if we're going to think about diminishing the image of God on the earth, and that's what happened in the golden calf. They no longer Israel did not want to be themselves the image of God. They rather worship something of what they thought was God, which is the calf, because that to them was a strong bull. Okay, go ahead.
It's streaming live on his channel right now, but my friend, and I don't always agree with Doug, but he wrote many years ago, he started, and he's on his third book and starting his fourth one right now, called Corrupting the Image. In other words, that's his theory, his, and I believe it's a well thought out and biblically based theory on you just mentioned the AI, the transhumanism, the corrupting of the image. In other words, and I'm just kind of simple sometimes. The oldest lie, the oldest trick in the book to Adam and Eve, or to Eve, is when the Kosh, the serpent, Eve, you can become as gods. I believe that is the ultimate lie and deception at the very end of the age, is corrupting that image to where we're not in the image of our creator anymore. We're going to try to become immortal and cheat death and beat death by becoming these little Gibborim lesser gods.
Well,
again, it's simplistic, but
you just mentioned exactly. If now, with that being said, compare this. I'm going to read you a verse. I want you to compare what you just said in regards to Adam and Eve, how Yeshua did not do what Adam and Eve did, and the Bible's trying to tell you that.
The
Check
temptation.
this out. Yeah, but watch this. In Philippians 2,
Okay.
now you have a contrast. In the garden, it was perfection, no death. Then the serpent tells the woman, hey, you'll be like God. And they wanted to become like God. Mind you, they live forever. They can commune with the Creator, but yet they wanted to be equal too. Now watch this. Look at the contrast that Paul is making in regards to Yeshua. Verse 5 forward. Philippians 2, verse 5. Think this in yourselves, which was also a Messiah, who existing in the form, the word there's pneuma, the form of God. Let me make sure that's the right way, the right word. I'm sorry. Morphe. I'm glad I checked it. In the morphe, the form, did not consider being equal with God something to be grasped. In other words, he is not trying to usurp God's authority like Adam and Eve did. Okay? But emptied himself by taking the form, the word form, there's the same one, morphe, right? The form of a slave, and becoming the likeness of people. Likeness there, I think is, let me see which one it is. It's actually that one, homoioma. I can't pronounce that. All right.
You got a helper?
Yeah. It says, by becoming the likeness of people and being found in appearance like a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death. That is the death of the cross. Now, once he does that, the reverse of the curse occurs, right? Therefore, also God exalted him and graciously granted him the name that is above every name, that every knee, that in the name of Yeshua, every knee shall bow, and those in heaven and those on the earth and those under the earth, and every tongue confess that Yeshua Messiah is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Okay, so what you just mentioned is exactly what drove Adam out of the garden, was his willingness to try to usurp God's authority by wanting to be like him. Yeshua did not consider that to be grass. It says that. So he says, no, I'm a servant. I'm going to serve, and I'm going to fulfill the purpose of God's calling in my life. And he did. And by doing so, then God says, hey, you have now all authority, power in my kingdom. I'll make you my prince. I'm the king of Israel. Now, so what do we have? Full term. We have AI. We have people creating something. Humanity now wants to be creators. So, and even what's his name? The guy from Twitter. He said it. Elon Musk. He says that AI is the worst thing anybody can possibly do, because yes, because
the guy that renamed it X, by the way.
Yeah, because it's usurping God's creation. So we have abortion, which is practically, human sacrifice.
It is.
Okay. So we have people changing genders. There's 3 genders, by the way. There's male, females, and mentally ill people.
I was going to say male and nuts.
So we have, they're trying to change God's function,
creation, his design.
Right. I believe that is one to what, and you know what made me realize about my opinion now? The other day, there's some AI that was elected to become a CEO of a company, a robot. And I'm going like, oh my. I mean, think about that for a minute. A computer looks like a human is going to be leading a whole company now. I mean, that's an abomination if you think about it, because now we're putting God's creation as if it doesn't matter. And
I'm gonna put a question up. I'm gonna put a question in this, and I'm gonna explain that I think Laura is perhaps misunderstanding. So, no rapture or gathering with glorified bodies. I can't go along with this lumping it into one basket when the words in Scripture is just singular focused. At least my understanding, Laura, is no. There will 100% be a gathering of the elect. There will be, per 1 Thessalonians 4:17, there will be a catching up. There will be, from 1 Corinthians 15, there will be our corruptible bodies in which there's death will become incorruptible. At that time, in other words, at the very end of this age, I believe the resurrection, when Yeshua says the resurrection is on the last day, he's going ding, ding, ding. That's the seventh day. As this sixth day ends, as we approach that seventh day, that's what I believe. Now, Mark Savoda, and Mark, if I'm butchering the way you pronounce your last name, he was pretty dogmatic earlier in chat, Rico, that there won't be humans, that everybody gets transformed during the millennium or the seventh day. I didn't disagree more vehemently, Mark. I mean, during this process, there's a reason why, as Rico's been talking about, why the Levitical and the Aaronic system will be reinstituted, because in our incorruptible state, we won't have that death infecting us, if for lack of a better word. But those alive, those that are still human and in their mortal corruptible state, and if we look at passages in Isaiah, I mean, there's not going to be any war, but there's still going to be death. It's going to be strange if a person doesn't live to be 100.
You know,
so we're not mixing.
But I don't know why they're mixing rapture with the gathering of the glorified bodies, because the gathering of the elect is biblical, but the rapture theory was invented by Darby. That's not really a biblical thing. Let me give you a quick example. We should be able to have that in the Bible.
Yeah, the gathering is everywhere in Scripture.
Right. So, but in the time of Noah, he survived the divine judgment because he was righteous and moral. He went through it. He survived it. He was saved through it. I think it's a cop-out when people say we don't want to be here. And by the way, 99% of the people who believe in that sense, some of them, they question whether or not Torah is still relevant. And it's like saying, oh, we want to, I want to drive a car, but I could drive 100 miles an hour and I don't care about the law. When there are certain laws about what you can do or cannot go. There's no biblical precedent for a catching away or a rapture per se and leaving the Jewish people behind. I mean, there's nowhere to be found. You don't find that in the Bible. You know how that came about, right?
Again, I believe there is a catch. I just like to use the term gathering. I hate to use, and I make fun of the word rapture because I now call it the Zapture doctrine. And some people get really upset at me, and I really don't care. It's a silly doctrine, and it's an escapism doctrine. It's based entirely on dispensationalism. You have to totally ignore and try to say that Matthew 24 is just written to the Jews. And it stems from dispensationalism, which teaches that only the house of Jews are Israel, when all in covenant, all disciples are now citizens of Israel per Ephesians 2. Romans 11, we're grafted into a singular olive tree. There's not two trees. We wild former pagans, wild olive trees, wild branches are grafted into that singular tree. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So, well,
I mean,
I was going to say the typology, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were protected through the fire. Noah was protected through the judgment. Israel, when the judgments fell on Egypt and on Pharaoh, Israel was not affected at all by the last seven. I'm not concerned at all about the trumpets. When those demon bugs or whatever they are get released, they're not going to touch people that have the mark and the seal of Yah. They're just, you don't have anything to worry about. So,
but remember that when you're looking for a quick getaway, you're not going to be prepared. My question really will be, and I don't know if my sister Metzing here may be willing to comment. What if the rapture does not occur the way it has been taught? Will God stop being faithful in his promise? Or it's just that we have been looking for a quick getaway when you don't find that anywhere in Scripture. So let me finish my thought here on the red heifer, and then we continue. So we have the heifer. Then we have the ashes for corpse impurity. Then you got to clean the Temple Mount. That's not going to be a day. I mean, they gotta basically destroy everything that's on the Temple Mount, remove the trees, because you're not allowed to have trees on the Temple Mount according to the Torah, and you're not. You have to cleanse it. You have to clean everything up there. then you have to know exactly where everything was, because it's a blueprint. And when people don't study the temple and the topography of Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, they assume that you can place the temple building on the altar any which way they see fit. They don't realize this is a blueprint. No one can change it. It's a tough need. Okay. And when you have a precedent for this, when they came back from Babylon, that Ezra, they built the temple, they built the altar in the same location. They built the altar in the same location as the previous one. Okay. So the question is, where will the altar be? Instead of arguing about all this stuff, we need to know where the altar was. By the way, we know within inches where it was now, because we can locate. We now can locate based on the 36 cisterns of water on the Temple Mount. We know where this building was now. We literally know. We know where the altar was. We know where the buildings were. We know where cistern 28 was, cistern 27, cistern 2930. We know where the main cisterns were for all this stuff that gave function to the temple building. We found the information. We have the archaeology, but people refuse to look into the temple as the guide for the prophetic picture. And yet, in Revelation chapter 8, it says that the angel will proceed from the temple with great incense for the prayers of the saints. It's using a golden censer, an altar, and the golden altar of incense, Yom Kippur. Revelation chapter 14 talks about the last gathering. He'll come out of a temple. He'll come out of the altar to regather the last gathering. We don't know when that happens during the year. So, I mean, what are we studying?
Question do you believe that the ark needs to be the original ark? I believe it was hidden. Do you believe it will make an appearance in the near future?
I would love for that to happen, but we don't need it for that to happen in order for that to be done.
Okay. Well, how will and from a Hebrews looking at the book of Hebrews, Yeshua's role currently as high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. I don't see how. Obviously, we do not need that to be cleansed, and that's the one question I always had about Yom Kippur, or as Lisa says, Yom Kippurim, the Day of Atonements. That you can't really have the full temple ceremony, the ritual of Yom Kippurim without the ark. Like even in the second temple period, the high priest had no ark and no mercy seat that goes, to perform the Yom Kippurim.
You can have the temple building, but if you don't have the altar, you cannot do certain things.
If you don't have the ark,
the ark doesn't matter.
Oh no, for Yom Kippurim, you have to have the ark according to Torah. According to Torah, you do. Don't you have to
but if it's not there, if it's not there, you still can sprinkle in the Holy of Holies. It doesn't matter.
What made it the Holy of Holies, though?
The sacred space that God said this is Holy of Holies.
But wasn't so? You don't think the ark has to be located for this to occur?
Now, I'll tell you one thing though. If it is located, oh boy, I gotta tell you, that's gonna be the most. Let me put it to you this way: right now, we temple people, we are basically being canceled out. That's the reality. Temple people, we are being canceled out. And you know what I'm doing? I'm just preparing myself, reading, studying, going to Israel, researching. I'm waiting for timing. When that red heifer slaughtered, a lot of people are going to be really interested in what we have to say. Because then they're going to be really confused. Because you see, when they build the altar, according to the system of religion, the church is not supposed to be here. Okay? So then they're going to go, wait a minute, what's going on? And they build the altar, then you have the daily offerings. That's another quandary. Because what's going to happen now? Did Jesus, wait, let me finish my thought. Did Jesus did away with that stuff? And what's the deal? How come they're bringing it back? And so therefore, we prepare ourselves to understand that there's a prophetic understanding of the temple and the altar. The Holy of Holies can exist without, because it's about the blood. The blood is what brings the reconciliation. The Ark of the Covenant is the seat of authority, but God's still in control, even if there's not the Ark of the Covenant.
I understand.
It's the blood that matters. What if you have the Holy of Holies and the Ark of the Covenant, and you don't have a priest, you don't have an altar, you don't have the blood? You just have a nice building with no purpose.
But can you imagine if the ark is brought forward in the next
Man,
few years or in the next year? What would
what
again?
would bring?
And stake my kingdom status on it, but Wendy actually, we're Facebook friends. Nice lady. Well, she is the priesthood of Melchizedek, the priesthood of the firstborn redeemed. And Wendy, we can talk about that another day. But Eddie Chumney's teaching he did about a year or two ago at Jacob's tent on Melchizedek, I thought it was excellent. I don't know if Rico's listened to Eddie's teaching on that, but
I have.
but do you have any different understanding than what I would say? I would suggest maybe go listen to Eddie's teaching on that. Do you have a different understanding or a tweak on what Eddie was
Different understanding. I've heard his teaching, and I respect Eddie very much, but I don't agree with him.
Okay.
I mean, because anyway, that's just
all right. We'll discuss that. We'll discuss that in the
But
future.
you will think that there will be one verse in the Bible that says that we are priests in the order of Melchizedek. You have minimum 10 verses that says priests and the sons of Aaron in the Torah, minimum 10. But there's not one verse that Yeshua said after resurrection. No one except the book of Hebrews, and we don't even know who wrote it. In the time of the destruction of Jerusalem, that mentions Yeshua in the similitude of Melchizedek. Similitude in the it's not even, he's not even Melchizedek. He comes in the similitude, in the form of. And by the way, chapter 10 tells you that he did that once and for all. And now he's sitting at the right hand of the Father. So he is a priest in the order, but he's not officiating anymore because he already did that once and for all. But there's not one verse, and this is my premise. My premise is this. Where in the Bible, in the New Testament, do we have one verse that says that you and I are priests in the order of Melchizedek?
I don't believe we are yet.
But wait a minute. The book of Ezekiel says that we're going to be in the order. The sons of Aaron will be restored again to the temple.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So does it say anywhere in the book of Ezekiel and in the prophets that the kingdom is going to be a kingdom of Melchizedek priesthood? Nowhere.
Again, I have not done a deep study on it. I would say
I have.
I would probably align more with Eddie, and as far instance that Adam would have been a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. Now, I do believe that
that's an assumption.
That who Abraham offered tithes to was I don't like to use Christophanies, but I believe that was Yeshua. That's
an assumption.
Yeah. It's I can make a good case.
Wait a minute. Are we going to be driven by assumptions, or are we going to be driven by
No. I can make a great case. That's a different topic. We could have that discussion.
But by the way, you still have not proven that there's a verse that says that. You've given me assumptions. Now, I would agree with you. But wait a minute. I would agree with you.
We'll have another talk.
I would agree with you that, yes, the function of Adam was to be king priest. God gave him the authority to do that. I get it. But I cannot go to the stretch that it was Melchizedek because the Bible does not say that. Now, it wouldn't bother me if Yeshua returns and say, hey, by the way, Adam, he was a priest of Melchizedek. Not a problem. I don't care. But the moment the Torah was established and the moment the altar was erected, God selected a family to do the work.
Right. Yes.
So that's my premise. Before Torah, I don't care what existed. After the Torah, God says, these are my people. They have been ordained. They have been anointed. They have been dedicated. Where is that in the New Testament in regards to people? By the way, in Numbers chapter,
I agree with you that right now we are not priests according to the order of Melchizedek. Period.
Well, we will never be. The Bible doesn't say that anywhere. It's not supported anywhere.
Again, I'm not even talking. I try not to do seventh day, next stage, vehement discussions, because when we get there, Rico, we're going to go, yes, King, no, King, you say so, King.
Now you know why I focus on the concrete things. I mean, listen, man, I respect other positions, and that's fine. But I used to believe that a long time ago, and I did my research, and I said it's not right, and I cannot teach it anymore.
You might know Maria. I mean, Peter does say we are a royal priesthood, a chosen.
Wait, time out. Wait, Who
No,
is
no, no,
Peter talking to?
I'm not saying that royal priesthood is or according to the order of Melchizedek.
No, I know. I'm with you. But who is the audience Peter's talking to? He's not talking to
He's
the
talking to
Gentiles.
the house of Israel.
Thank you. So he's not talking to Gentiles. By the way, doesn't in Numbers chapter 18 says that if not let me read it to you. Please let me read this. It's Numbers 18. When people talk about the priesthood, I would like for them to consider going back to the temple on this. By the way, listen to what it says.
Right.
Adonai said to Aaron, you and your sons and your family with you will bear the guilt of the sanctuary, and you and your sons with you will bear the guilt of your priesthood. Moreover, bring your brothers with you, the tribe of Levi, the tribe of your father, that they may be joined to you to minister to you, you and your sons with you before the tent of meeting. They will keep your responsibility and the responsibility of all the tent. Only they may not come near the vessels of the sanctuary and the altar. So both of you and they will not die. And they, watch this, and they will be joined to you, and they will keep the responsibility of the tent of assembly for the entire service of the tent. And a stranger may not come near to you. A stranger. If a stranger touches this, it dies. You know what the word stranger means there? Zar, an illicit person. Where has any Gentile grafted into Israel, becoming Israel, had the right to do any of the blood manipulation in the temple?
Never.
So what makes us think that's going to change?
I don't.
Okay, good.
Here's the part that's interesting about Torah, okay? And this is where I do agree with Eddie. And
By the way, I love Eddie. I haven't seen him. He leaves 20 minutes for me. I haven't seen him in 6 months.
Well, and to my point recently in defending the house of Judah and their role in the plan of redemption is upon what we have when we get to Jacob, who's renamed Israel. We then have when they get the blessings, Judah receives the kingly blessing. We know that, and then David then is promised it's going to be his house. Ephraim and Joseph received the firstborn blessing, and that, to your point, Rico, Levi and the direct descendants of Aaron received that Levitical priesthood and that Aaronic priesthood blessing. In other words, the roles, those three roles are split up. I believe they're obviously unified in Yeshua, but as far as what we're talking about I don't think that ever changes until the heavens and the earth pass away. And of that day and hour, no man knows.
Yeah.
So to that respect, and to the brother that says I'm interrupting my guest too much, he apparently has never watched before. This is a discussion, not a lecture. So if you want to hear Rico lecture on it, he's got plenty of good lectures where you can listen to him uninterrupted, but deal with it. So with that, I think audiences actually like the questions and stuff, Rico.
Well, listen, we're learning. We can listen to I listen to other teachers and I respect their positions, even if I have a different opinion. I think we have to learn the difference between an exchanging in a theological, mindful, scholarly way. You present your thesis, you present your thesis. The audience should be astute enough to say, let's find the evidence. Because I made a comment to you where you made a few comments, and I said, are we basing it on assumptions or biblical evidence? And I did that on purpose because sometimes we are used to, in the system of religion, to move based on opinions. And this is true. People say, well, I think this way. And by the way, that happened when you had Joe Dumont.
Yeah.
90% of what he said was his opinion and his theories, trying to push them as fact. And the reason why I'm pushing hard on him is because in this case, he will not listen to any reason whatsoever. And I think that's not wise. We both hear the case. I remember reading his book a long time ago, and I stopped because I got confused. and I told him, I said, dude, man, I got confused. Not putting you down. I just couldn't understand it.
I like Joe, and it's interesting. It was like one of the very first live streams I did with Doug, where it was myself and Doug and Joe. And I think about the 8th time, because I didn't get confused. He was teaching Rico. But about the 8th time that my brother Joe told me I did not understand, I'm like, dude, if you say that one more time, you're going to make me blow a gasket because I understand what you're saying, and what you're saying is wrong. You're just incorrect. And on certain topics, we might disagree. Maria's like, Maria, we're going to have a discussion maybe with Rico on a future day on Melchizedek. Today, I really want to talk about.
But listen, I have a 3-hour part series on YouTube. Maybe you may consider going to Wisdom and Torah on YouTube and watch those 3 hours. Let's be the responsible way. Okay, let's do this. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying anybody else is wrong. What I'm saying is wait out the evidence. You listen to the other position. Now go back to the Wisdom and Torah Ministries on YouTube and look for the Melchizedek priesthood and listen to the 3 hours and weigh it out. I mean, I'm not trying to convince you. I know what I believe based on the evidence. What we need to do is learn to present the thesis. Say, hey, this is my position. It's based on this and this. And then the other position, what is it based on? Is it speculation or interpretation or basically what you feel it is or what the Bible says?
Well, I think a good little panel discussion, and in that one, I'd probably just sit back and maybe interject every once in a while. I'll reach out to Eddie, and that might be a really good chat.
I don't know. It's just, I think it's best for people in their time to basically wait out the evidence. We have our information out there. I mean, I'm not trying to say I know more than Eddie. Eddie even know more than me. He's been doing this a long time, and I respect him dearly. But there's some things I don't agree with him on, and that's okay too. And that's perfectly fine. But what we do is we propose our theories and our research, and it's up to the audience. Now, as long as we both continue to believe in Yeshua and believe in the Torah and things like that, then everything else will sift out by itself. I want to finish the whole thing about the red heifer here.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So let me try to catch it again. You keep asking me a different question.
Go ahead. Red heifers.
Yeah. All right. Are we going to stay with the red heifer?
I'm not going to interrupt you until you tell me you're done about red heifers.
Okay. So there are steps that we need to consider. All right. When we look into this, you need to consider the steps. Because if you don't consider the steps, and I won't be able to go through the teaching, but there are certain things. You need, for example, the Temple Mount. We don't have the Temple Mount yet. Okay, I think, my opinion, I hope I'm wrong, but my opinion, this war is going to continue to escalate. The Muslims are going to make one big mistake that we're going to really get the Jews more upset than what they are. And then all hell's going to break loose, and then we'll take the Temple Mount. Now, what's interesting is, if we take the Temple Mount, when we take the Temple Mount, then we already have the ashes of the red heifer. Now, let me tell you this. If they manage to slaughter the red heifers, 1 or 2, I don't know how many, before Passover next year, and by the way, if they announce it, I'm going to be there, God willing. That's a game changer that every so-called prophecy teacher must consider changing some positions in their theology. Everybody in prophecy will be challenged. Just like in 1948, when the Jews came back to the land and many people had to change their theology and prophecy. Next, we have to have the altar. The altar takes 8 days for purification. But you need to know where it was, because you cannot build it anywhere you wish. It has to be in a particular place according to halakha. Okay? It cannot change. So who are the people who know where the altar is? You need to find out, because if the altar is not in its proper location, it's not legit. This is another thing. You need to study the temple to know this, and a little of archaeology and topography. Yes.
I was going to say, I totally agree with you. And when Yeshua says in Matthew 24, when you see the abomination standing in the Hagios, the holy, the Kadosh, topos is a location.
Correct.
The Greek word is not. It's not the Greek word that means a literal structure. It is a location to your point. So anyway,
well, this whole area is holy. They just have different elements, stages of holiness. This is holy, but this is holier. That's holier, and not the holiest of all. That's all it is. But the whole area is holy. It's a location. I
agree.
All right. So then you measure the altar. Hanukkah is 8 days, but it's 9 branches, because one of them lights the other ones. Okay. Hanukkah is a celebration of the dedication of the altar. It takes 8 days. They celebrate it like Sukkot, because for 3 years they could not celebrate Sukkot. So therefore, there's not, for example, Hanukkah is not a feast. So therefore, you don't say Chasameach. It's not a feast. It's a day of remembrance of the fulfillment of the prophecy in the book of Haggai, and then later on how the Maccabees retook Jerusalem and dedicated the altar. Very important. So it requires the dedication of the altar. I believe that date, that time frame, is important in prophecy, in my opinion. Okay.
Yes.
Now
Amen.
you have the dedication of the altar. The altar takes 8 days to dedicate. So that means that they cleanse the area, they build the altar, they already have the stones. They already have it in the Temple Institute. I've seen them for myself. So they got the stones already. With the ashes of the red heifer and the waters of purification, you sprinkle that or whatever, but they don't need that for the stones. Stones does not acquire ritual impurity. Okay? So therefore, you start the altar. It doesn't matter how big it is right now, as long as it's an altar. Then you start the tamid, the daily.
The daily.
That Joe always talks about, that he never wants to talk about the temple in connection. How in the world can you connect COVID with the tamid when it's actually a temple language? And I'm thinking, really? Consider looking into the proper context. Okay, so now, then you have to have those things being reestablished. That means that you need a Sanhedrin council. According to Deuteronomy 17, that's a judicial body composed of Levites, priests, and Israelites. You need that according to the protocol of the temple to make major decisions on holy things. All right. Then you need a priest, and you need the Levites and the high priest. We got all those things already. All we need now.
About Judah, the house of Judah does right now.
I missed the first part.
I said, when you say we, are you speaking of the house of Judah, the Jews?
In Israel, they have that already. Okay. They already have people trained. They already have the stones of the altar. We already know where the altar was. We know where the temple location was. We know where the cisterns were. What's his name? Charles Wilson, Khan Rashid, all those great archaeologists in the 1800s from PLF, Palestine Exploration Fund. They did all that. We got all the evidence. We got all the stuff. Now, it's temple researchers who know about the archaeology and the topography that now can go in and says the altar was right there. Now they start building it.
Question for you. Is it where the Dome of the Rock is now, or is it off to the side? Is it in front of it, behind it?
What was? The altar?
Yeah, the altar.
No, the building was where the Dome of the Rock is.
I'm asking the location for the altar. Is it where the Dome of the Rock is built right now?
I'm trying to answer that. Yeah, I'm trying to answer that. The Dome of the Rock is here. And in front of it, there's a big area. That's where the altar was. Where the Dome of the Rock is, that's where the temple building was.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, look, people say, well, this is the latest theory, though. They say this. Well, we can put the Dome of the Rock. I'm going to look. You're sitting east, okay? So you're east right there. I'm looking west.
I'm on the Mount of Olives.
Right. This is the temple. Oh, the Dome of the Rock will be right here. And they say, no, we can build the temple on the north of the Dome of the Rock. Well, you can do that now, but you cannot do that during the time of Solomon, because you have what is called the Fosse, and you have the Bethesda Valley that was filled in by Herod to make that whole area that we have today. So you cannot move the temple. This is not a political thing. It's a God thing. You want to ask me something?
Oh, I was going to ask, this is more like me speculating, interjecting. I do believe Yah has a sense of humor. Obviously, we're created in his image. I wouldn't doubt it if maybe Hezbollah or the Houthis or somebody launches a rocket that makes it through and obliterates the Dome of the Rock.
That would be so ironic, wouldn't it? That would be so ironic. Hey, we want to bomb Jerusalem. Boom, they destroy their own place.
Yeah, so, that's what I mean. I wouldn't doubt it if that happens, or it could be like you said earlier, and I'm in speculation mode right now, theory mode, that Judah, the house of Judah, the current nation state of Israel, kicks Islam butt and just says, no, we're going to do what we want to do.
I hear you. I hope so. So really quick, because I have to leave in a few minutes. I have another teaching I got to teach on later. So we got the red heifer now. We got the ashes will come when they do the slaughtering. We need to take the Temple Mount. Then you have to measure the area. You have to build the altar, 8 days. Then you start the daily offerings. Then you have to have the priesthood, the Sanhedrin, the offerings. And by the way, they are the one, according to Torah, it has to be done from the temple for the Jubilee to be declared. Okay? And then you have the importance of the Mount of Olives. The Mount of Olives is the place. They have cemeteries everywhere. Okay? So it's like what we have is a countdown. Having the ashes, having the red heifers available for me is one of the most exciting times in history. Maybe the theory of the 7 years or the theory of the Great Tribulation, if the ashes of the heifer are prepared and then we have an altar by next year, hey, we're on. All it is a pointer of direction. So I'm looking for the ashes. Oh, we got the red heifers for the first time in how many years? We got heifers, right? Then we happen to have the ashes. Oh, now we got the ashes. Now we have the stones. Now we got the priests. Now we have everything ready. Oh, we took the Temple Mount. Now we got the altar. Oh, wait a second. So now I'm buying my bag of popcorns. I'm sitting back and I'm saying, now I know what needs to happen. Some idiot is going to come in. He's going to be pretending to have the authority of God's kingdom, and he's going to sit somewhere near the altar, and by default, by sitting, because he is not ordained by God, because God placed the sons of David. That's why Yeshua needed to come in the line of David. Okay? Because the prince and the prince of God, the king of Israel, must come a descendant of David. Okay? So therefore, what you have here is that now you just wait until the guy sits down. If he is not of the line of David, he is usurping the authority, and by default, that offering and the tamid now is profane. Now you know how many days before the coming of Messiah, and every argument will be over, because now you have something tangible that guides us to know where we're at. So when you tell me, and I hate to pick on him, but when he said I was blown away by that the whole desolation and the tamid was the COVID thing, I'm going like, wow. That's a stretch to me. And I hate to say it like this, but we try to have a conversation about the Tamid and it's the daily and a long time ago. I don't know if he remembers, and it's never considered. And all I'm asking is, when you're dealing with prophecies, by the way, let me ask you a question before finishing. 96% of all the prophets, from what tribe they are from?
Judah.
No.
Levi?
Ezekiel, Aaron, Jeremiah, Aaron, Levi. Ezekiel?
Well,
they were from the same family. They were Levites.
Oh, that's Levi.
Okay.
I was doing what everybody does. I was mixing Levi and Judah into a big old pot.
No. In this case, it's different because they have different authorities for different things. So the majority of all the prophets, I'm not saying all of them, the majority of all the prophets were sons of Levi. And sons of Aaron. Why? They were the messengers of God. They were the mediators between God and earth. That's why Yeshua becomes a high priest. Because the high priest on the earth at the time of Yeshua was actually a corrupted person. He was a son of Zadok, but he was corrupted. Okay, the office is holy, but he was corrupt, just like this president. Okay? But just because the president is corrupt doesn't mean the Constitution stops being the Constitution. And it doesn't mean that the office of the presidency should not be respected. It's interesting. Americans respect more the corruption of this president and the office than they do the office of the priesthood that God ordained. They want to change it to something that God doesn't ever mentions anything. But we want to disregard the office just because some of the priests were corrupt. That makes no logical sense. God's office is forever to those whom he appointed for. And no one can change that. You know, as a lawyer, that once a judge makes a judgment, you have to go through a process of legal means to change or to appeal or do something.
Well, and I was going to say one of the I don't like to call them arguments, but with my Christian brothers and sisters that have been taught that the law has been at least partially abolished, Yeshua is very clear. I did not come to abolish. I came to fulfill. Fulfill does not mean abolish. Not one jot, not one tittle shall pass until heaven and earth pass away. These things you've been saying, even if it offends most Christians, We do have his Torah. It is truth. It's truth. And to your point, Rico, I when it says forever, if we're going to be honest in our hermeneutic and how we interpret Scripture, and to your point, Hebrews does not mention, it talks about the old, and I've had this discussion recently. I think it's in Hebrews. It's like the
7.
last verse, maybe of Hebrews 8 or 9. It talks about the old is fading. In
Stay
other
ready
words,
to vanish away. Mm-hmm.
yeah. It say that the old is done away with or complete yet. And I like to, it freaks people out when we're talking about the new or the renewed covenant in Jeremiah 31. When I'm like, we're obviously not there yet, and they look like I just grew 3 heads. I said, well, people are still teaching one another. All don't know Yeshua right now. So it can't be fully realized. It's recognized, it's implemented. Yeshua's blood did make the covenant with the many through his blood, but we're just not there yet. We're still in our corruptible state, to your point from earlier. We still have to face death. Death has not been defeated yet.
Well, actually, can I submit something to you? The evidence of the destruction of death happened on the cross and resurrection, but then it has not fully been how the Paul says it, we have not been perfected yet. You know that word perfected, make us perfected. For if the law made nothing perfect, you know that word perfect actually means teleo, which is like a consecration. We have not been consecrated to God from the mortal to the immortal yet. Correct. Well, that process began when Yeshua died and resurrected.
Correct.
It hasn't come to its full completion until, yes.
It's been, to use an accounting term, borrowing it from my friend Chris Steinley, it has been sort of like, it has been recognized. It's on the books. It's credited to our account, but it's not been fully realized yet because we were talking earlier, my back still hurts. I moved around recently and my back hurts. I play golf. My back hurts.
Well, understand that we are in a transition, and that's why in Ephesians says that we are sealed unto the day of redemption. In other words, we are sealed as God's property, and if we die before the coming of Messiah, he already promised us that he will deliver us as he did his son. That's the gift that God has given us. So I hope that all of this that we said makes sense. And by the way, I just want to say I have nothing but respect for all the other teachers, and I always appreciate their efforts and their research they do. And if I have a different of an opinion, it doesn't mean that I don't like them or anything. It's just we have difference of opinion. I think what is wise is to learn to have a dialogue and compare information. Sometimes we have a trench and we establish and we dig our own trench and we don't want to get out of it. No, even if somebody drops a bomb in it and I'm telling you, hey, somebody dropped the bomb in it, please get out. No, I like my trench. And I think there's a problem in the movement in which we cannot really sit down together and dialogue and compare biblical information in context.
And to that point, Rico, I believe it's important to be able to have discussions and to disagree. And I believe kingdom status reward, talk about the Bema seat judgment, how we differ with one another on certain issues and to do that in love and being kind and respectful while vehemently disagreeing or debating a topic is probably going to go a much longer way toward pleasing the Father than being perfect in all of our understandings and everything that we believe. Because I can guarantee everybody right now, some of my current understandings are right. Your point about that bomb, I just started studying these Jewish feasts 6.5 years ago because I was a prophecy geek. They ain't Jewish, 6.5-year-old me was so incorrect, and I guarantee you, November 15th me is incorrect on quite a bit right now.
So let me ask you a question before I end. Have you ever considered going back to the feasts and studying them, following the sidurs that are used for the feast, and looking at every reference in the special services they do during the feast sidur that is based from the temple, and there's a huge message about the coming of Messiah in every single one of them.
I have not. I've listened to some of Halisa's teachings on it, and again, that's as far as me doing a deep dive myself personally. No, but maybe you just piqued my interest.
Yeah, I mean, please consider that 45% of the Bible, 45% of the commandments is connected to the temple. The feast is connected to the altar. New moon to the altar. Calendar to the altar. The offerings to the altar. The Jubilee to the altar and the temple. How can you talk about Jubilee and never consider the temple is beyond me? I don't understand it. But what we must consider is that God established his temple on the earth to teach us something. What is it? The Bible tells us this purpose, but we refuse to look at it, but then we have an opinion about it. And I think that's unfair. Let me give you one last comment. I practice martial arts for years, 30 years now. And I'm a master in 3, and I'm learning 2 new ones from scratch, jiu-jitsu and catch wrestling. And I struggle with techniques. I'm 57 years old. Sometimes I'm rolling with a 20-year-old, 23-year-old, 30-year-old, and I survive. I do quite well 90% of the time. But there are times when I get caught in a technique with all of my experience in combat arts that I did not know. And I thought I'm ready. I'm stronger. I may be maybe a little quicker against certain people. You know what I do after I finish? After I got beat? I don't get upset anymore. I did that the first 6 months because my ego got on the way, you see. So I thought, hey, man, I'm a master, so I should not be losing. But then I changed my whole mindset. My wife taught me, let your ego be your master. I'm sorry, do not let your ego be your master. Don't let your ego be your master. Let your ego be your servant. Great teaching my wife gave me. And I began to look at these guys, and I'm thinking, how in the world can you be better than me? And when I've been practicing self-defense for so long, instead of me saying, why is he beating me? I said, hey, how did you beat me, and can you teach me? And when we began to exchange information, it became an exchange of valuable experience. They teach me what they know. Now I'm learning what they know, knowing that they don't have the experience of all that I know for 30 years. Eventually, I'm gaining more than losing. I lost in a game that cost me nothing, but I've gained knowledge that will keep me now longer, adding to all the information I got. And the temple is that. The temple is that foundation.
You learn most your defeats as opposed to your victories, and so same thing in our studies.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's you when I was a young lawyer and got the floor wiped with me by some old wily lawyers, and now sometimes, hey, I've got a job to do, and if I've got a young lawyer making dumb mistakes, I'm gonna let them do it in the courtroom, but I'm gonna go talk to them after court is over and go, listen, here's what you did wrong. Okay, showed your hand too early. You did this. You should have never said this. And that's an older lawyer with some experience in the courtroom and everything. Teaching a young lawyer some new tricks.
Experience, and we all learn. And many people start teaching right away without going through the process. I was blessed. I had great men taking me under their wing and teaching me. I have to run, man. Thanks for having me, bro.
You are more than welcome, Rico, and I appreciate you coming. You have a blessed day, okay?
All right. Shalom.
All right. See you. Hey, and everybody, thank you. And that is one reason actually why I don't really do teaching per se. And that's why I always just have a guest on and like to talk as opposed to doing the monologue. There are too many right now so-called Torah teachers that it's as if they never read 1 Timothy or the last chapter of Titus. So beware out there. Test everything Rico said against Scripture. Test everything that I ever say. Definitely. Shalom, everybody. Y'all have a blessed rest of your week. Bye.